Hello everyone, Charles Coleman here, presenting you my top 10 list of operatic incels. These are characters in certain famous operas that are embittered and do certain things to make it bad for the so-called good guys, the tenor and the soprano, and manipulate the situation to results that end badly in these wonderful operas. In fact, the great baritone Cheryl Milnes has said a few times that in your typical opera love trio of a soprano, tenor, baritone, baritones are the trois in the menage a trois. Being a baritone myself, I can relate to that, at least in stories, hopefully not in my personal life. Speaking of which, what is an incel for those of us who are not engulfed in the 21st century culture? Well, the word incel is a formation of two other words, involuntary and celibate, meaning that these are people, usually men, who have not gotten lucky. They want to, but they are celibate because it's not by choice. And maybe on the surface that it seems sympathetic, but ultimately it's just a bunch of guys who are embittered by this. And there are these chat rooms where all these guys post about how mad they are at really good looking women who have no interest in them whatsoever. On a more serious level, this results in harassment from guys to women on the street with video. There's these guys that take their video cameras and stream live and catcall them, and unfortunately even more serious situation where there's killing involved. We won't go into that. And I think we all have grown up with certain insecurities when we're younger, in high school, and we see that beautiful woman across the room, and either we come up to them and get rejected, or we don't have the courage to come up to them. And then you reach a fork in the road where you decide whether you want to better yourself as a person or become this embittered jerk like incels. It's funny, in pop culture movies, the insecure nice guy gets the girl, but let's face it, that doesn't really happen in real life. You have to better yourself first before you can get anybody. But as far as this subject matter with regard to opera, I've made a list of 10 characters that are at the very least potential incels or incels altogether. You tell me what you think. So let's do this. Number 10, Iago from Giuseppe Verdi's Otello. Now, technically he's not really an incel because he does have a wife named Emilia. Frankly, I think she was appointed to him as his wife. I have a feeling it was not by choice. My guess is that Emilia and Iago didn't really love each other. Emilia certainly didn't love him because Iago was such a jerk. And Iago probably had much more of a crush on Desdemona or Desdemona. But the reason he liked her is because Otello, this warrior whom Iago felt was of an inferior race, had this prize of Desdemona. And of course, Iago is jealous and does whatever he can to destroy Otello. And of course, Iago gets destroyed in the process. Nice going, buddy. So that's my number 10 choice. Number 9 choice is Beckmesser from Richard Wagner's Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg. Now, Beckmesser is not as much, well, he is a jerk, but he's not as devious as Iago. We know nothing about his personal life, although, let's face it, he's a little embittered. He is a Meistersinger, which is a master singer, kind of the German version of what we'd call a troubadour. And he is so full of himself and has thoughts on how a song should go, and he's a little embittered. He makes fun of people that don't do it as well as he does. And of course, the lead character of Die Meistersinger, Hans Sachs, kind of politely puts him in his place. Beckmesser comes across some lyrics that Hans Sachs wrote, and Sachs tells Beckmesser, "You can have them, but I wouldn't perform them publicly if I were you, because they may be beyond your ability to do it publicly." Of course, Beckmesser, in his ego, do not care, and they perform this song in the third act, and he says some weird words, and he completely messes up the song and looks like a fool. And ultimately, he loves, like a lot of all the other characters in the opera, he loves the character Eva, whom he sings to in the second act and completely makes a fool of himself. He is a potential incel. So that's how I feel about that. Number 8, Caliban from Thomas Addis's opera, The Tempest. Of course, it's based on the Shakespeare play. I like Caliban so much. He's half human, half beast, for which Prospero doesn't care for. I think because he is supposedly physically hideous, although we do see some of his good nature in the opera when, the spirit Ariel is trying to scare all these people on the island with her crazy noises. But Caliban tells everyone, don't be afraid, or in Shakespeare's words, be not afeard. It's a beautiful monologue from the opera, some of the most beautiful music that Thomas Addis has ever written, and he becomes this endearing character, even if he doesn't physically look like a regular person. Ultimately, he and two other people tried to take over the island from Prospero, but they fail miserably, and at the end of the opera, Caliban is alone, and we just can't help. It's interesting how the opera has more of a sad ending than the original play, and he's there alone, not knowing what happens now as he hears Ariel's beautiful voice in the background. One can't help but wonder if he would turn out to be an incel outside of the story of The Tempest. I like this guy, and he's the one tenor in this opera that is part of this top 10 list. Again, everyone else is a baritone or baritone type. You tell me. My number 7 choice in my top 10 list of incels in opera, Falstaff from Giuseppe Verdi's Falstaff, or if you prefer, Ralph Vaughan Williams' Sir John in Love. Falstaff is a mighty knight, or at least he was when he was younger, but now he's become this older and not so attractive guy who has these terrible habits of writing letters to two women simultaneously. And of course, the two women find out about each other, and they're both married, and they, of course, decide to mess with Falstaff for being such a jerk. And let's face it, I think Falstaff is the kind of guy that would go to a brothel and pay for it. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. Is he a nice guy personally? He might be a little fun with a few cups of sack. But outside of that, I think he's kind of a shady character. Next up, my number 6 on this list, Golaud from Claude Debussy's Pelléas et Mélisande. He is a prince who, in the beginning of the opera, is hunting but gets lost and comes across this beautiful maiden, Mélisande, who is very confused and she doesn't know where she is. And Golaud takes her in, and in 5 months they get married. Whether it's her choice or not, I don't know. But she falls in love with Golaud's brother, Pelléas, and they form an affair. And then Golaud catches him and kills his own brother. And then he has this embittered rage, like, how could you do this to me? But wait a minute, he killed his brother. Oh, please. And ultimately, she dies of a broken heart. And Golaud is a potential incel probably after the story of this opera. Next up, number 5, Klingsor from Richard Wagner's Parsifal. He started out as a guy that desperately wanted to be a member of the Knights of the Holy Grail. Gurnemann tells this story in the first act of Parsifal. But ultimately, the Knights turn him down at first because he has supposedly too much lust in his heart. Well, Klingsor says, okay, no problem. So he castrates himself. And he says, all right, problem solved. And the Knights are just disgusted by his actions, so they throw him out. And of course, Klingsor is really embittered by this because he made this supposed sacrifice to show his devotion to the Knights of the Holy Grail, and it doesn't work out. So what does he do? He creates his own little world in defiance of the Knights of the Holy Grail, steals the Holy Spear from Amfortas, wounds Amfortas, and everything else happens. And he gets defeated by Parsifal, and that's the end of that story. Crazy guy. What can you say? Number 4 on this list, Claggart from Benjamin Britten's opera Billy Budd. Now, there's no specific reference to love, at least in the physical making, although a director can easily manipulate it to be so. But in the story of Billy Budd, Billy Budd is this likable character that everyone admires on the ship. He is like the one ray of sunlight in an otherwise very hard life at being a sailor on the Indomitable. And Claggart, although he's a person in power on the ship, nobody likes him. He has this terrible personality, and he does whatever he can to destroy this Billy Budd, whom he's jealous of. And everything ensues. Ultimately, he accuses Billy Budd of mutiny, and Billy, unfortunately, has a stammer and is unable to defend himself against Claggart, so he hits Claggart so hard that it kills him, and then Billy subsequently gets executed for it. And therefore, Claggart was successful in his endeavors, even though it cost him his life. Next up, number 3 on my top 10 list of operatic incels, Tonio from Il Pagliacci by Ruggero Leoncavallo. I like Tonio ultimately, even though he becomes an embittered person. He has a crush on this soprano, Nedda. Of course, she has no interest in him, and he declares his love early on in the opera, saying, yeah, I'm a guy who's fat and ugly, but I do have a heart that beats. And Nedda, of course, doesn't care about this guy. He probably overdoes it. She, unfortunately, not only does she rejects him. They get into a struggle, and then she ultimately strikes him with a knife, usually hitting his forehead, giving him an injury. And as he walks away, she continues to tell him how much of an ugly jerk he is. You think she could be a little bit more subtle, that rotten woman. And by woman, I mean... Okay. And of course, Tonio becomes this embittered character. He catches Nedda having an affair and tells Nedda's husband, Canio, about it. And ultimately, Canio kills his wife on stage. Well, that worked out the way it did. Antonio was successful in his accomplishments, obviously. So we get to my number 2 character on this list, Barnaba from Amilcare Ponchielli's La Gioconda. Barnaba is in a certain position of power. He's a spy associated with the Inquisition and has a huge crush on Gioconda. Of course, Gioconda is not interested in him. She's interested in Enzo, the lead tenor character. The only problem is that Enzo is in love with Laura, a mezzo-soprano who's married by force to King Alvise. The point is that Gioconda doesn't love Barnaba, and at one point in the opera, Enzo is imprisoned, and Barnaba tells Gioconda, I'll tell you what, I'll get him freed if you let me have one night with you. Anyway, he accomplishes it. Enzo goes off with Laura, the woman he loves, and then Barnaba comes to Gioconda's place to, hopefully get lucky, and Gioconda serenades him, dances around him very seductively, and what does she do? She takes out a dagger and kills herself right in front of Barnaba. And Barnaba says to her, oh, guess what? By the way, I killed your mom because she was such a to me. Oh, wait, you're dead. Ah! That's how the opera ends, with him yelling, running away. I feel a little bit sorry for Barnaba, but he is definitely a bit of a jerk. And now we get to the number 1 incel in my top 10 list of operatic incels, and I'll bet you this is obvious. Alberich from Wagner's The Ring of the Nibelung. This, of course, is a composite of 4 operas, Das Rheingold, Die Walküre, Siegfried, and Die Götterdämmerung. And it's amazing. He doesn't start off as a jerk. The whole ring, starting with Das Rheingold, starts off with him flirting with the 3 Rhine maidens guarding their gold. And he said, hey, ladies, you want to hang? And each one of them tries to seduce Alberich, but then rejects him because he's such an ugly little dwarf. And he, of course, gets embittered, steals their gold, and renounces love. Alberich then takes the gold and forms it into a ring, and then Wotan steals the ring from him, and then a lot of stuff happens. Ultimately, all the lead characters of the Ring cycle die at the end of Götterdammerung, except Alberich. There he is, all alone. I have sympathy for this guy, even though he ends up being a jerk. I can't let go of the fact that he wasn't such a jerk in the beginning. And the Rhine Maidens, like Netta in Pagliacci, could have been a lot more sympathetic in their rejection. Anyway, those are my top 10 of incel characters in opera. Let me know what you think. All the best.